With fewer job prospects than John Rocker's publicist, I'm Matt Straq. This is That Sports Show. All right, this week was the TSS traditional writer's retreat, where the bosses pamper the whole squad with a trip down to a place they call the Sullied Waters House of Asian Massage. As the team sat in the poorly lit waiting room, one of our nervous interns picked up an old international paper and noticed that an entire English amateur football club had been jailed in Crete last month for dressing up as nuns before going on a booze binge on the traditionally conservative island. The men were held for a weekend in costume before their release was secured by the British government. Clearly this was the sports story of the year, but it had somehow slipped between the cracks of constant media reminders that Kobe was supposed to be the second coming of MJ. But now that we know about this, these jailed limeys have got us thinking, what have been some of the most notoriously criminal sports teams through the years? We're going to start down south in the mid-'80s with Barry Switzer's Oklahoma Sooners. Now, the Sooners in the 80s had quite a bit going for them in the race for the most criminal team of all time. As Switzer was just settling into his 16-year term as head coach, early in the decade, there was a smattering of arrests for drugs and larceny. But 88 was an especially criminal year for the Sooners football team, as players were arrested for murder, rape, and selling drugs to an FBI agent, all in rapid succession. Switzer's house was even robbed by one of his players. Switzer eventually resigned as head coach after that season, and the NCAA slapped the Sooners with a probation that included a 2-year ban on TV appearances and a reduction in the number of scholarships. They were still able to graduate the 2006 Miss America, though, so it wasn't a total loss. Next up, Oklahoma's rival school to the east, the University of Miami, in the 90s. During the mid-90s at Miami, they used to joke that they took players' team photos from the front and then again from the side, and there was good reason for it. Just like the Sooners, the used players at that time dabbled in felony assault and drug convictions, but Miami actually turned it up a notch when a university official publicly admitted to faking hundreds of financial aid forms to help football players get undeserved grant money in exchange for kickbacks. The admission was so outrageous that it led to Sports Illustrated calling for the cancellation of Miami's football program, at least temporarily, because the program scandals had begun to lower the quality of student experience on campus. Eventually, the NCAA concluded that the university had actually lost control of its own football program and took away nearly all athletic scholarships for the next 2 years. Miami's football team was still able to participate in one of the best sports brawls ever, though, with Florida International University in 2005. Finally, we're moving into the pros and talking about basketball. Now, Charles Oakley in 2001 famously told the New York Post that over 60% of the NBA was smoking pot. But there was one team at that time that took toking to a whole new level. In the early 2000s, the Portland Trail Blazers saw no less than 5 arrests for players, culminating with Portland police finding a full pound of grass in a crawl space at Damon Stoudemire's house. And the Jailblazers didn't stop at pot. There were a few years when Portland was suiting up a registered sex offender and a convicted animal abuser all at the same time. Players would get into fights during practice, and Rasheed Wallace even threatened to kill a referee in a parking lot after he disagreed with a foul call during a game, which coincidentally is the same reason the TSS team isn't allowed back into trivia night at our favorite watering hole. Thanks for watching another episode of That Sports Show. As usual, be sure to visit the website, thatsportshow.com. Let us know what you think. Until then, I'm Matt Straq. We'll see you next time.